welcome everyone. I am Meta Radai, the co-founder of JUARA Skincare, and here we are back with another wellness webinar. So I'm just gonna start sharing my screen right now. Ta-ta. So today we are here with Let's Wind Down Together. It's a tasting for all. And again, we believe at JUARA that beauty is not only skin deep, but it's a whole mind and body situation. So a little bit who we are. For those of you who know us, welcome back. I think one day, you guys, we can trade places. You can give this speech. But for new ones, welcome, welcome. JUARA is a skincare line. We are inspired by Indonesian Jamu tradition, which is a 2,000-year-old tradition that serves up basically health in a juice and also kind of it's like super juicing and also great beauty rituals. And we use a lot of superfoods and healthy ingredients. We're also about holistic wellness about the mind and the body. So we mentioned we don't think that beauty is just a skin thing. It's really a whole body thing, and it's a health thing. So it's not just ailment prevention, but it's about enjoying your experiences and also deep social connections. So already right now, for those of you who are wondering, why are we doing a wine tasting and an herbal tradition webinar? I think you're kind of getting the clues right now. And of course, it's a belief in mindful rituals. Be inspired, add meaning to your life. Don't go through mindless routines. We believe that if we actually are present and do things with a sense of purpose, we will have greater joy and happiness. So that is a lot in a beauty line. So objective of these webinars, we want to be able to connect to you in the community. This was really triggered when the pandemic started, where social distancing is not emotional distancing. In our line and our brand, the founder was we've always been about staying connected to our community so we know how to best serve and give. And we want to offer valuable content in straight talking ways. It's pretty no nonsense. And we also want to engage. So, you know, valuable content to you is if we know what you want. So chat. Platform for presenters. This is also a place where we can connect people. So if you have, you have your own business or you have your own service that you want to offer and you want to reach out to a new audience as well, and it's in line with, you know, our Jamu lifestyle, healthy living theme, please reach out. We're just offering like a turnkey platform to share where you can connect to people and where people can connect to you. So that is our offering to the community. Today we have Heather, who is a sommelier and also very much the founder of Vininterest and really a brand ambassador, an independent brand ambassador to Boisset Wines. That's what she'll be tasting today, and that's what I will be joining to on my side of the universe. Heather's also a really close friend of ours, and so this is very special to me because I've seen her personal journey of going from a very successful IT project manager, which she's still capable of doing, to pursuing a passion in life that was really what called to her. And I've experienced and heard about your journey of going to Paris and France and learning and studying, and then now being quite an accomplished sommelier, starting her own company, which does consulting and wine tours. So this is also a story about someone who I think has really pursued her personal passions and dreams. That's what makes this so special. So Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you, but first, just, you know, to kick it off, to start, what is the purpose of, like, why did you start Vininterest? What's the purpose of it? Like, who's it for and why is it awesome?
Yes, so thank you, Meta, for the lovely introduction. And yes, Meta actually does know my journey quite well. She actually was the one who dropped me off at the airport the night I moved to Paris with my 4 huge bags. So it's quite a journey. But anyways, the reason that Vininterest started to begin with was I went to France to study in Paris, and I studied for 15 months, wrote my dissertation. And Vininterest started as a social media project out of my graduate studies. And from there, it has grown. As I've learned a lot about wine and I talk to people about wine, especially people that are really curious about wine, but they may not know a lot about it, there's a lot of intimidation around wine because I think wine has a bit of a reputation for being snooty and people are secretive about it. So one of the things I love to do is provide people information so that it can be simplistic, and hopefully it will engage you so that you can have some curiosity and try some different wines and see what you like. So I try to break it down into simplistic terms so that you can understand it and maybe it's not so intimidating. So that's one of the big goals I have with Vininterest. But on top of that, I just love sharing my passion for wine. And if you're somebody that's in my inner circle, I love having people over for dinner. And if I know that you're a wino, I love pulling out my favorite bottles. And I always have a story around it. So wine to me, and I think also Old World, is all about creating connection. So it's been happening this way for centuries in places like France and Italy and Spain, where families generationally have been making wine, and you know, it started sometimes around their kitchen table. So I really love this story, and it's just something very interesting, and you never know what's going to come in your glass, because as any product, wine is one of the most unpredictable products out there, because it's really sufficient upon and dependent upon the climate. So even though you're growing the same grapes, the same terroir or area, the wine can present itself from year to year in a very different way. So it's very, very unpredictable. So it's always a special moment in your glass.
So with that, why don't we get started?
Yes, sounds great. And so if everybody, whoever's joined later, while it is a wine down, and I will encourage you to drink wine, I would just like to ask you to hold off for just a moment, because we're gonna go through an exercise that I'm gonna take us through, where we're gonna get a little bit more in touch with our body and our senses, so that you can actually hopefully smell and taste what's in your glass. And for you as the consumer or the person learning about wine, hopefully you can get more in touch with what you like about a wine and be able to describe it to somebody. Because if you're out in a restaurant and you want to order a special bottle, or say you just want to go buy a bottle down the street at your favorite wine shop, or for me, you know, having the vernacular to actually articulate what you want in wine is really important, so that the person on the other end can match the best wine for you. So hopefully we'll accomplish that tonight, or you'll at least learn a little bit more about wine.
Alrighty.
Okay, so we're gonna first start off, I'm gonna walk you through step by step how to taste, and we're gonna get in touch with our senses as we're doing that. And then once we do that, we're gonna then take a look at the Sauvignon Blanc and the Cabernet Sauvignon grape. Those are two grape varietals, a white and a black grape varietal, that I asked if you wanted to join in on the fun, to either grab one or both of those wines to join me in the tasting. And then last but not least, we will end with some wine tips and some myths. So that's really what I'm going to cover in the hour tonight. So let's move on and get started. Okay, so I think, as everyone knows, we have typically 5 senses, but with wine tasting, the predominant ones that we interact with are our sense of sight, smell, and taste. You can, you know, obviously with hearing, you can hear the bubbles in your glass if you've, you know, poured a glass of champagne, but those are the predominant ones that we're going to get in touch with tonight. So, all right, so for the novice person, why do we want to look at wine? Because throughout the whole journey of sight and smell and taste, what you're looking for is, are there faults in my wine? Because ultimately you want to enjoy what's in your glass, right? So if you're not a professional that's actually doing a professional tasting, you don't really care about all the other stuff. But some of the tips of the trade for you are looking at, and you can also grab a white sheet of paper like out of your printer and take your glass like this and look up against it with a lot of light. And you're going to want to, and I'm doing a bad job here at tilting it because I can't get it with the camera. But anyways, what you want to do is have it tilted like this, where you can see it on its side, so you can look at the rim to the center of the wine. And the question is, does the wine have a brown tint to it? Does it look clear? Those are 2 key characteristics that you're first going to look at when you're looking at in the glass. If it has a brown tint to it, it could be one of 2 things. The wine could have aged, especially if it's a white wine, or it's been corked, and that means the bottle's no good and you don't really want to drink it. So the funny part about sight, and also with wine, I think it aligns really well with nature, because white wines, as they age, they get darker. So I actually pulled out, I actually had it open, to be honest, a 2013 Chardonnay, which Chardonnay in general is darker than a Sauvignon Blanc. So you can see side by side, you can see the difference in the color already. But this one here in my hand, it is from 2013 and it has aged. So it's 7 years old. So this is like what an aged wine looks like, which is pretty cool. So it's, as you can see, it's gotten more of like that barnyard, like hay looking color in your glass. So I just wanted to point that out, you know, to you all. The other bit about sight is when you're in a restaurant, right? You know, the maitre d' might put the cork down in front of you. Have you ever thought about what that means? So part of what that is for you to have another clue to say, is there something wrong with my wine? Because if you smell it, which we'll get to that in a second, so I'm segueing into the smell. If you smell it and you smell cardboard or you smell grandma's basement, that's an indication that the wine has been corked. You also want to touch the cork, because if the cork is solid, because cork is from a tree, hopefully most people know that, but cork is from a tree and it is porous, and therefore a lot of the winemakers that want to age wines, they like to use cork so the oxygen can interact with wine in minimal parts. But anyways, if it's very crumbly, that's a good indication that the wine is corked as well. So those are just some tips on what to look for and why they do that in the restaurants. So hopefully, if you didn't know that, hopefully it's a new tip for you.
So,
okay.
Well, right before we jump to smell, I just want to take a little poll from the audience. I'm just curious. Heather, aren't you curious? I'm always curious. What's people's favorite types of wine? So you can see on your screen your options: red, white, rosé, sparkling. Did you know that those were the 4 categories? I didn't know. I had to ask Heather, like, what's rosé? So I guess it's
the one we didn't include here is dessert wine, but I don't think that's going to be your all-time favorite one.
Well, see, people are thinking, oh, interesting. Oh, okay. Well, we're going to close it up. We've got a few who are still thinking. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Heather, are you guessing?
I'm going to bet that people are going to say red. Yeah.
Ah,
I know it. Wow.
really?
Is that sparkling? Interesting. Okay, so we got some sparklers on the call here, huh?
You know, I always thought that white was kind of the entry level wine. Like if you're new to wine, I was sort of told that you go with white and you sort of graduate to red, and then at some point maybe you stay at red. But I had no idea it was going to be like this.
Yeah, for me, when I first started drinking wine, I hate to admit this, but I was drinking white Zinfandel. And I had a Pinot Grigio, Santa Margherita to be correct, from Italy. Those used to be my 2 go-tos when I first started drinking. But that's also what I want to say to people is, as you continue to experiment with wine, your palate or your mouth will evolve over time. And when I went to study wine seriously, my palate changed a lot. I also learned a lot about it. So don't be surprised that as you get more into wine and you get more curious, that your palate's going to change.
So cool. All righty. Let's move on to smell.
Okay. So when we go, so I already sort of started talking about this. The other thing is too, from a smell perspective, if you've ever drank sherry or like had a bourbon or something like that, that has like that caramely, appley smell, unless it's a wine from JUARA, which is a region in France, your wine's corked. So don't drink it. So in terms of smell, Meta, if you want to go to the next slide, I want to sort of go through this. So one of the things about our sense of smell, so these are some primary, and I kept it very high level. So if you can even start to pick out these characteristics out of your glass, that means you're really getting in touch with your sense of smell. But the cool thing about this list is, from a smell and taste perspective, we have glands called the olfactory glands that are in the roof of our mouth. And what those glands do, they sort of share space between our mouth and our nose, and they interact with our sense of smell and our sense of taste. So they're quite important when you're actually doing a proper tasting of wine. So we're going to have this put up here once we actually get to the tasting part. But I think first what I'd like to do, because we're always doing too much, and maybe you're sitting here listening, but let's like get in tune with ourselves, with our breath, so that we can actually focus in on what we're smelling in our glass. So what I'll say to you is, if you're sitting or whatever, if you're standing, whatever, I'm standing, keep your glass here. I'm going to ask everyone to close their eyes, and we're just going to take, you know, a breath or two in to center ourselves. And then I'm going to demonstrate how to taste. You can, if you've done this before, go ahead and do it already. And then we'll look at the chart and see if you pick out some of the characteristics. If not, I'll demonstrate it for you, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so let's close our eyes and center ourselves and take a deep breath in and let it out. Another deep breath in and let it out. In and let it out. And hopefully that's relaxed you a little bit. So what we want to do is then pick up your glass of wine, and you want to hold it here. This is what's called the first nose. And if you can smell it, all it means is it's pronounced. And maybe you can pick out something, maybe not. The second nose, which is where we go to when we evaluate a wine, is we swirl it around. And why do we swirl it around? That's why I said not to put too much wine in, because we're trying to oxygenate the wine in the glass so that you can pick up on those characteristics. And then you're going to stick your nose way in the glass and take a big sniff. So for me, I picked up on subtle hints of peach. I got a tiny little bit of citrus. You can do it again.
Oh my gosh, I just want to drink this already, Heather. It's interesting that the process of just getting ready and just getting into it, I just like almost feel like I'm salivating. And I can imagine this with a coffee also, or a tea, but
yes, actually
coffee
coffee
share
is
that.
100 cents. In wine, we can pick up about 200 cents. So it's quite a lot, very complex. So again, I don't know what everyone else, if you guys want to put in the chat box, if you're drinking a Sauvignon Blanc, like what are you picking up on the nose?
I'd love to hear what,
tiny little bit of citrus too.
I'd love to hear what other people say, because I have to admit, I smell lots of wonderful things, but I can't always articulate. So I'm always making things up. Somebody just wrote, I feel like I smell alcohol. That's a very fair point.
You probably do, in essence, smell a bit of alcohol, but you might be smelling also the minerality.
Somebody else is like, me too.
No, you can't get drunk from smelling. I can see some of the chat box. That's okay.
So
okay, so that is our sense of smell. And then we're going to move on to actually tasting. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information before we taste so you understand what's going on in your mouth. So Meta, if you want to go back to the slides.
Yep. There we go. This slide?
Next one.
And the next one.
Yep.
This is like tag team awesomeness. Oh.
Nope, go back. Yep, there we go. All right, so from a tasting perspective, I didn't want to stick my tongue out and point to different areas of my tongue. So we've got this cute little, yeah, it is a multi-sensory exercise for sure. So on your tongue, in your mouth, there's a lot of stuff going on. So not only are your olfactory glands working on the top of your mouth to try to pick up on the aromas that we just talked about and we just smelled, also what's happening is on the tip of your tongue, that is an indicator for sweetness. So sometimes,
sorry, can we drink this as we're going through this, or should we?
Yeah, you can drink it if you want, but don't drink too much, just so that we can be centered. Anyways, so sweetness is on the very tip of your tongue, and you know, wine is made from grapes. So some people think that all wine has sugar added into it. There are parts of the world that definitely do add sugar to wine, but for the most part, winemakers do not add sugar to wine. They really want what comes naturally off the fruit on the vine. And there are just some great varietals that are a bit more sweet in flavor than others, or they've done a process where they've made the bunches stay on the vine a lot longer so that they can actually make a dessert wine. So that's sweetness. Acidity. Acidity is what happens on the sides of your mouth. So if your mouth really starts to water, which if you're drinking a Sauvignon Blanc, they're typically really high in acidity, and it'd be something similar as taking a lemon and sucking on it. So like if you're the type of person that's ever done tequila shots and you do the lemon first, do the tequila shot, you get that weird look on your face of sourness. That's similar to acidity, but it just makes your mouth water. And then tannin. Tannins come from the skin, the stems, and barrel in wine. That's what gives it that bitter, astringent taste. And what happens is your gums in the front and on the sides of your mouth light up. And if you've ever heard like a very poetic person who works in the industry say, it just had attacking, you know, tannins in my mouth. That is what they're talking about. And that typically you find in wines that are on barrel. Body. So how does the wine actually feel in your mouth? Because when I show you how to taste, we're going to swirl that wine around in our mouth so it coats our mouth, so you can get all of these senses. But one of our master somms gave us a really great analogy that I always use in all my tastings, which is milk. There's skim milk, 2% milk, and there's like half and half. And the weight of that milk is very different. So if you ever did a side-by-side tasting of all those, skim milk is very watery, very light, washes down. 2% milk's a little bit heavier, but if you drank just straight half and half, it would coat your mouth and it would probably be pretty disgusting. I mean, wine is not the same sense as that, but you get my drift. And then last but not least, an indication of a high quality wine is the finish, is what you'll hear, or the length. So how long do those flavors that you taste stay in your mouth? So that can be an indication that the wine you're drinking is premium or luxury. So what we want to do, and I'm going to do this before Meta then goes back to the other characteristics, because we're going to sort of mold these two together and see if you guys get it. So what you're going to want to do is take just a little sip, don't take too much. And we're going to do what I call fish lips, because you got to suck in some oxygen, twirl the wine around in your mouth, and then you want to just sit there and let it. And so oftentimes I'll close my eyes and I'll just concentrate in on what I'm tasting in my mouth and what are all the senses going on in my mouth. So if you want to do the breathing exercise again first before you do this, you can, but let me like do a little demo of what this looks like. So you're going to take just a taste. And swallow. And for me, my mouth is very watery at the moment. I don't taste any sweetness. I'm getting a little bit of salt down the middle of my tongue, which I think I left off. Now I realize I left off my diagram. And I'm getting a really long finish with this, but I'm picking up on a little bit of grapefruit, a little bit of peach, and definitely citrus. And it's got my wine, the wine I'm drinking has a really long finish as well. So who else here picked up on some of those things in your mouth? If you're drinking a white wine and a Sauvignon Blanc, maybe you picked up on some of the things, but if you're drinking, say, a red or something else, it may be a slightly different experience for you.
I'm tasting things, but my question is, how do you learn to refine your tongue if things are like familiar, but you can't put a, it's, you know, is that a practice thing or is that a talent thing? Is like perfumers, do you need a nose or can you?
It is a combination of the two, but it is about training. I mean, I will say that when I was in school, we drank a lot of wine. There were a couple mornings where we were drinking and well, not drinking, but tasting like 15 to 20 wines. And that's why you spit, because if you don't spit, yeah, it can, yes, the length can be an indication of a premium or luxury wine. So if the length stays for like, say like 5 minutes or longer in your mouth, that is a very good indication that it's a nicer, finer wine.
Okay.
But, oh, there's another Q&A. I see some things there. So what have people picked up on? I don't know if people are putting it in the chat.
I'll share the screen.
Okay.
Can be what you picked on or actually questions. I mean, yeah, I will admit, I'm gonna ask the most base level questions. Like I absolutely enjoy my wine, but I'm gonna tell you, coffee, I can break things down. Wine, this is awesome.
Yes.
It's also new to me.
Yeah, exactly, and it is. And sometimes too, when you're drinking wine, it can evoke memories. It's sort of funny, or at least it has for me anyways. Or I have these experiences like I taste something that smelled like something else. that was like, for whatever reason, very memorable to me, or I smell something that tastes like something else that I ate. So it can be a variety of different things. What does it mean if your wine leaves you thirsty or dry mouth? So dry mouth, ooh, someone's getting stone fruit. That's great. So when you get a dry mouth, it can be, obviously your wine is quite dry. It can be a little bit on the bitter side, so maybe it's high in alcohol as well. So I don't know if you were you drinking a red wine? The dry mouth question, I don't know if they responded. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, that's what that means is, it's probably the fact that the wine is a red wine. It probably is very tannic, and it can be super dry. And as red wines age, the tannins tend to mellow out and the fruit starts to come forward a little bit more. But red wines also tend to be, not all, but some of them, especially ones for aging, tend to be less acidic. So oftentimes you have dry mouth too. So everyone's got dry mouth on this call.
There's one question that came in from the Q&A.
Sure.
The wine, when you're tasting, should wine be swallowed or spat out?
Like I said before, if you are trying to do an evaluation, or let's say you do go to a wine event. I know there's several out here on the West Coast where I'm at, and you know you're going to be there for a couple hours and you don't want to get too intoxicated, then I would say, if you don't fully enjoy the wine, then I would say spit. But if you really love it, don't ever spit, because wine is about pleasure. Enjoy what's in your glass.
So this is my follow-up question to that. Is there a point where your taste buds get less sensitive the more you drink?
It happens quite easily. So which is why I was telling people to not drink so quickly, because then what happens is, obviously, you're drinking, your tongue's there, you have, all the veins in your tongue, and therefore the alcohol gets absorbed very quickly. So you can really get to the point where you can't taste anything. You really can't taste anything right now. Your mouth is astringent. Okay, so you're drinking a red wine. So, and that's where we're headed to next. So we're gonna do a rewind and we're gonna go back through this. So if you only have one wine on this call, I luckily have two, because I've got this great contraption called the Coravin that I took the wine out of my bottle. It's got a surgical steel needle that goes through the cork, and it allows you, through argon gas, this little thing here, will let the wine go into the glass. But we're going to go into the red. So if you only have one wine that you're drinking, perfectly fine, because guess what? You get a second chance to try and apply everything we've just gone through. So let's go back to sight. So I'm going to pick up my little piece of paper again, and this time I'm going to grab my red wine.
No, there was actually a question that came in earlier. If you could explain again the whole, the brown, if it's brown against a white piece of paper, is that a bad thing? Does that mean it's corked?
Yes, that is an indication. Actually, great question, because I was going to share this. I often do. No, it's not just you. So hopefully you guys can see this. So when I was training, this is what came in our materials to train us on wine. So if you can see this row right here, like these ones, this is what wine, especially a white wine, starts to look like as it ages and or it gets taint and corked. If you're doing red, it can start to look sort of like this. But the interesting part about wine, right? And I always talk about wine, especially when I'm talking about different grapes themselves. Wine and winemakers aspire to find balance in all of those characteristics that I talked about: the acidity, the sweetness, the tannins, and the body. And winemakers have a vision in mind when they're trying to create a wine, and therefore they will use multiple grapes to blend to get that style of wine that they want. So as white wine ages, it gets yellow, like I was showing you, or it can even get to this point if it's way too old and you've had it too long. And red wine does the inverse. Red wine gets actually really light. So I had the pleasure during, and we're gonna do sight again, so this is why I'm saying this. I had the pleasure, yep.
Can you briefly just explain what is corked?
Cork, okay, so what cork means, let me demonstrate. So I'm gonna use this bottle. when you're storing wine, wine should be stored on its side because the liquid inside needs to be in contact with the cork here. If it's a screw top, it's not a big deal. You don't need to do that because the screw top's not going to do anything. But like I said, cork is actually from a tree in Portugal. If it's stored like this, that means the liquid is not in contact with the cork and that cork will dry up. So like if you've ever opened a bottle of wine and let's say you got the cork part of the way out and it broke, that means oxygen got in and it can turn the wine to sort of like a vinegar, tawny, sherry taste, and it can be very dreadful.
So when it gets crumbly cork, I've had that.
The indication that there could be some faults in your wine because it probably wasn't stored right. Okay. So if you're going to store wine on its side in a dark place, not in a light place, and definitely not in the kitchen.
All righty.
Does that answer? Is that cool? Any other questions?
There is one, but I interrupted you in the middle of something, so I can ask you right after that.
That's okay. I don't even know if I remember what I was saying. White wines need to be drank sooner. Okay, so the answer to that question is, I'm not going to answer it right now because I've got a little factoid later on in this presentation that will sort of address that question. So if we could hold off on answering that one, that would be great, and I will address it at that point.
But there is actually a related question, related, not related. If you think you'll be there somewhere for a few hours, should we start with a white rosé before transitioning to a red?
Exactly. Because again, you know, the whole point, hopefully the whole point of drinking a wine is sharing it and enjoying what's in your glass. So you don't want, so as you know, noticed here, if I were doing a proper tasting, we started with the Sauvignon Blanc, and then let's say I went with the Chardonnay, you would definitely want to start with the lighter weight. So like a Sauvignon Blanc, a rosé, even sparkling can be at either end. That's pretty versatile. But then you would want to move to a heavier grape. So if it's white, you know, maybe it's Pinot Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. If you're in the red category, if you like Pinot Noir, which is a lighter grape, maybe a red blend, and then maybe you end with a big bold cab. You would definitely not want to start out with a big bold cab at the beginning of the night, because then everything else will just wipe out your palate and you won't taste anything. And you really want to enjoy it because food and wine complement each other, hopefully. Cool. It's a hopefully.
All right. Well, I'm ready for the round two.
Okay, round two. Round two. So we're going to do the same thing again. So I've got a Cabernet Sauvignon in my glass. And I don't know if you can see, but in my glass, it's definitely a ruby color, but it's got a little bit of purplish tint to it. And when you see that hint of purple in the red, it means it's a young wine. So again, as wines tend to get older, they start to lose that purpley tint. Maybe they'll go to a ruby or a garnet, and then eventually they just get, now I know what I was saying, they eventually just get brown. So when I was studying, one of our master somms shared with us a 1971 Bordeaux out of his collection. The wine, you know, I was 7 years ago, so the wine was well over 40 years ago in taste, and it still stood up on, you know, through the test of time, and we could see our fingers through the glass. So like with this one, if you want to look through and try to see your fingers through the, again, the middle of the glass, I'm not demonstrating this too well in this video, but you'd want to be like this. If you can see through, like right now, I'm having a hard time seeing my fingers, which just means it's a dark wine. But the Bordeaux that was in 1971, I could totally see my entire hand through it because it was that translucent, because it had lost all those tannins. But that's what the tannins add to the wine over time, is it helps it stand up. And then what ends up happening is the fruit that was in those grapes and in that wine start to show through. And we could taste that. It was quite an amazing experience to taste a wine that old. So that's actually what I was saying earlier. So, okay, so sight. For this one, I'm not seeing haziness. I don't see any color brown. So it looks good to me. So now if we want to go back to smell. So let's see what we smell this time around, especially if we're drinking a red. So we're probably going to pick up on some different things in our glass. So if we want to recenter ourselves, because we've been doing Q&A, let's just do one, breathe in, breathe out, and then we'll go again, okay? And remember, we have a first nose and a second nose. So let's close our eyes, take a deep breath in, let it out. And I can tell you, I'm already picking up stuff from my glass. I smell red fruits. I smell a tiny little bit of jam in my glass. And we haven't even gotten to the second nose, so I haven't even twirled it around in the glass. The other thing that you can observe, and I haven't touched on this, and I don't know if you're seeing it here, is what some people call tears or legs. And what tears and legs can reveal to you. So if you're evaluating a wine, because we have to do, you know, level of deduction, it can tell you that this wine, I know where it was grown, but it will tell you if it has a lot of legs and it really is coating the glass, that the wine was grown in a hot region. So hot region would be California. Napa Valley is considered a hot wine region. Another hot wine region would be Sicily in Italy. So wine grows best 30 to 50 degrees north and south latitude of the equator. Now with global warming, that's getting stretched a little bit, but on average, that is where wine grows the best to produce more premium luxury wines. Not to say that people aren't growing all over the place, but I mean, the Brits are making sparkling wine and they're doing a hell of a job. So anyway, so that's what, you know, that's what an indication there is. It also means it's probably high in alcohol, but typically with the hot climate, you're going to have high alcohol anyways. 14.5 or more.
That just because of the heat and the fermentation and
Yeah.
just
It has nothing to do with the fermentation. It has to do with the temperature of the climate and plus how much sun is beating down on the grapes. So when you're in a hotter climate, you have to, as a winemaker, looking at your vineyard, you have to constantly test the grapes. So some people just take a test. They've been making wine for a long time. They've got a pretty acute palate, or they'll take it into a lab and make sure that it hasn't developed too much sugar, because you don't want wine grapes to develop like Concord grapes, which are big, you know, watery, juicy, because then that means the sugar's collected in the grape, and we don't want that for good wine, not for a dry wine. So it's really, you know, understanding the conditions in which you're dealing with in the terroir to come up with that. So, all right, so let's go on to the second nose. So we're going to twirl again, and then we're going to stick our nose deep in the glass and take a big whiff. So I can definitely smell a little bit of black fruit. I'm picking up on some baking spice. And when you start to pick up on spice, typically what that means is you're going to get that spice, especially in Chardonnays or in any reds that have been on barrel, from the barrel. So the barrel, and the newer the barrel, the more you're going to get from there. So if you taste like butter in a Chardonnay, some spice like cardamom, cinnamon, stuff like that, that's an indication that probably the wine has been barreled for quite a while, and also potentially newer barrels. So as barrels get used, they lose their characteristics in the wood, and it doesn't translate into the wine. So what are people picking up on this time around? It smells yummy.
I do smell berries, but it's such a natural instinct. And someone also mentioned in the chat that there's an instinct as soon as you smell, then you just want to taste. It's just it's this immediate. It's kind of like when people it's the other way, when people put on or try our body creams or our fragrances or lotions, and when we say it's unscented, they put it on, they still go, we're like, it has no fragrance. So it's interesting. I just want to comment that our senses are so connected to each other that it's hard. I'm finding it difficult to separate, like, oh, taste. I just kind of want to.
If you think about it, when you're cooking in your kitchen, right? Or if you make coffee in the morning, that aroma that wafts through the air, it makes you more hungry. You want to eat it, you know, like think about Thanksgiving Day, right? When we're making the turkey, and the turkey's, you know, within a couple hours of being done, how the whole entire house fills up with that smell. I mean, what we're doing here is we're evoking that in the wine, because we're oxygenating it so that those characteristics, God, I can't even say it, come up, and we're sticking our nose down in the glass so that we can smell it. So as you start to do this more and more, if you want to become more curious about wines and being able to articulate, I saw in the chat that someone said, I smell black fruit and I smell something else, but I don't know what it is. Believe me, I went through that as well. As you continue to drink wine, and there's also aroma kits out there, if anyone wants, is interested in it, if you're a wine nerd like myself, you can get those to help train your nose so that you can start to identify what you're smelling. You can also use real fruits and vegetables as well. So you can use that as a backdrop. So now let's get on to the good part, because this is the tasting, right? Yeah. So let's, this is the fish lip part. Ooh, this is really dry. It's almost like the whole mid of my tongue is a little bit like sandpaper. With this one specifically, my gums are not lighting up too much, so there's really a light tannin in this. And I'm not getting a watery sensation in my mouth. What I'm more so getting is a lot of like red and black fruits, still a little bit of spice. Yeah, it's just a really drying wine. So this wine, yeah, it makes you want to go. I'm sure that's what everyone was talking about in the chat, right?
There is one question: if red wine has more tannins than white wines?
On par, yes, with the exception of Chardonnay. And in all honesty, it's really the decision of the winemaker. So again, the winemaker has a style in mind that they're striving for, and they know the levers that they need to pull, which could be, does it go in barrel? Is it still cask fermentation? Because you're gonna get, if you take a white wine like Chardonnay, put it in still cask, put the rest of it in barrel, it's gonna come out very differently. It's gonna bring out very different characteristics. And in addition to that, when I start to talk about the grapes, wine is about balance. So oftentimes the winemaker will pick a couple wine pairs or different varietals that complement one another. So it's all about like the yin and the yang. It's quite amazing. I mean, wine, for all intents and purposes, is a crop, right? You grow it, it's a lot of risk. You harvest it like you would any other produce, but then it goes through this whole process of fermentation to develop what we're drinking in our glass. So, it transforms when it goes through that fermentation process. And in addition to that, you want to blend stuff together so that you get hopefully harmony and balance in your glass. Cool. So I think it's awesome how Mother Nature, has created this stuff. And then we as, man-made, we figured out how to create that balance. And that's what people are striving for.
What I'm curious
about some other questions.
Well, I'm actually curious for the people.
If you guys just want to drink now, just go ahead.
Yeah, I've been kind of coyly on the side. No, actually, I'm on camera, so there's no hiding. Sorry, Heather. Okay. But I just want to know, for the people out there who are actually only having one wine or one drink, if anyone actually experienced something different the second time they tried that, because sometimes the wine hasn't changed, but we have when we sort of open up.
Yes, and also actually, it's another good point. When you open, when you put wine in your glass, as it comes more up to room temperature, hopefully it comes up to room temperature, it's gonna open, it's gonna change in your glass as well. So if you're sitting there chit-chatting like we do, chatty Cathy's, and it sits there for an awful long time, what it tasted like at the start and maybe an hour later could be totally different.
Very cool. All right.
Any other questions before we move on to our next piece?
Okay. I think we got the myths and facts.
Yes.
Next. All right, guys.
We do.
So, the fun part. Let's test.
Yeah, we're going to test your knowledge. Okay.
All right, guys.
So myth or fact, Sauvignon Blanc is the parent of the Cabernet Sauvignon grape. Is that a myth or is it a fact? Put
your votes in. I see people are thinking.
I
Because
know.
sometimes those polls like come out and the answer is like bang, bang. And then sometimes it's like, brr. And then when I call the last 5 seconds, like I'm going to now, all this answers start coming in 5, 4, 3, 2. Some people just aren't voting.
Oh, come on. Just pick
All right,
one.
I'm going to end it right now.
50-50.
2, 1, now. So that's the answer. This is what all you guys have said. So 60,
Okay.
30,
It
30.
is, Meta, do you want to reveal?
I shall reveal.
It is a fact. So, like I was just talking about Mother Nature, in Bordeaux, Cabernet or Sauvignon Blanc and Cab Franc were growing in the wild and somehow mated and created their baby, Cabernet Sauvignon.
It's a love child.
It's a love child grape, which is also why Bordeaux produces all those types of grapes. So you guys can enjoy whatever you'd like. At this point, I'm just gonna give you a little bit more information, hopefully that's interesting to you, based on the 2 grape varietals that I've been drinking here tonight. So the Sauvignon Blanc, it grows best in a cool and a moderate climate. And as you can see, the most common regions are probably those 5: France, South Africa, New Zealand, Chile, California. France is going to produce our cool climate because the notable regions in France that produce Sauvignon Blanc are Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé. Does the size of the glass matter? Yes, it does. I'll go into that in just a second. So as you can see here, I'll put them up. My white wine glass is smaller than my red. It has to do with oxygen. So anyways, so in France, the Loire Valley, which is in the northern part of the country, produces that more green fruit, which is gooseberry, which most people don't know what a gooseberry is. I didn't either until I moved to France. You're gonna get herbal notes. Sometimes you're even gonna get the scent of cat pee off of Sauvignon Blanc. I know that doesn't sound very appetizing, but that does happen. And then it also grows well in a moderate climate, where it will produce less fragrant nose and more stone fruits like white peaches, citrus, stuff like that. You typically do not oak a Sauvignon Blanc, but we as Americans always have to do it our way, right? So somebody in Napa Valley decided to oak Sauvignon Blanc, and it's the, God, I'm thinking Pouilly-Fumé, which is actually the French thing, a Fumé Blanc. So Fumé Blanc from Napa Valley is actually an oaked Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc is meant to be a young, fresh, and very crisp wine, and it does not benefit at all from aging. So I would tell you, don't go out and hoard a bunch of Sauvignon Blanc bottles. Drink them when they're young, and they do blend quite nicely with Semillon, which is also another great varietal white wine from the Bordeaux region. So you're again gonna get high acidity, medium body, pretty much no oak, and it's still gonna be a dry wine, but it's a quite refreshing wine that's great to have with, like, say, ceviche. You could have it with sushi, salad. It pairs really well with those things, or just by itself. So that's pretty much the Sauvignon Blanc. I don't know if anyone has questions about the parent to the next grape that I'm gonna go through. Okay, Cabernet Sauvignon. It is the most, as you can see by my chart there, the most planted grape varietal around the world. Everyone wants to grow and produce Cabernet Sauvignon. For a cab, it does not grow well in a cold climate. So we could not put it in Loire Valley, which is in the northern part of France. Instead, we go down to Bordeaux, which is where it's much warmer. So in moderate climate, it produces red fruit, black fruit, a little bit of spice again from the barrel, because Cabernet Sauvignon totally benefits and gets better with the age when it's on barrel. So it's typically oaked, and its partner, its yin would be Merlot. So when a winemaker is blending grapes, again, they want to get the great characteristics out of both. So a Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be higher acidity. It's going to be a fuller wine. It's going to be dry. It's going to be high in tannins. But a Merlot is going to be a little bit more mellow, and it's going to come in there and sort of even out, you know, like like a balance to try to get that balance of acidity, sweetness, tannins in your mouth. So it is a marriage of wines. And if you're, and I'm going to keep talking about France because a lot of people don't understand French wines. So Bordeaux is the area in France that is known for Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. There's a river that crosses through the city, sort of like Paris, if you've been to Paris, the Gironde River. And to the right bank of the Gironde, it's going to be predominantly Merlot. So Pomerol, Saint-Emilion. If you go to the left side of the bank, you're going to get more Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's going to be in Saint-Estèphe, Chateau Margaux, places like that. So if you know which one you like better and you're drinking French wines, you just need to either go to the right or the left bank. So, or you might be a Napa Valley lover of Cabernet Sauvignon, which is going to be big, bold, and high alcohol.
Cool. All righty. Moving to the next.
Yeah, so we have one more fact or myth here. And this goes back to a question that was asked earlier that I didn't want to answer because I didn't want to give this away. Most wines are meant to be drank within 5 years of production. Is that a myth or is that a fact?
All right, guys. This is so nerve-wracking because I can't press the slide for too fast because then the answer will come out. So,
so it's like, you know, do, 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 do.
No, it's a technical, yeah. So woohoo, the answer is coming in. I love seeing it before all of you do. All right, it's closing in 3,
2,
1. All right, this is what you guys all think.
Ah, you're right.
Fact, 40% say myth. All right, the reality is,
It's
yay!
So while it used to be that many winemakers, especially Old World, and I don't know if you know what constitutes Old World versus New World. Old World is Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Germany, Greece, such and such, and everyone else around the world, Africa, New Zealand, Australia, North and South America, we're all considered New World. New World consumerism and what people are drinking is driving how winemakers are making wine in the New World specifically, more so. Because of course they want to sell wine and have us enjoy it. So yes, most wines are meant to be drank within 5 years of production. So don't go out and hoard, again, a bunch of wines and not putting a price on it, but it does sort of correlate with the price of the wine. Is more of your premium or luxury wines are going to be those wines that actually can age. And there's a lot of factors that go into the cost of wine, but a big part of it is because of the barrel. Because not to like poo-poo on some of the lower cost wines, because there's a lot of great ones out there, but some of the times the winemakers don't use a barrel. They might put in those wood staves just to get a little bit of wood flavor in the wine because it's cheaper.
So we've got a couple of questions, and I know you have one tip. We've got 5 minutes left, so we're trying to make it through this real quick. But there is a question that related to the size of the wine, if glass shape actually could impact the taste or not.
It can a little bit. If you want to get really specific and crazy over the top, it can. But I will tell you, actually, I don't have the other one, but this is. I don't know if you can tell by the sides here, but this is like a traditional white wine size of glass. You can put a Pinot Noir on this as well. It's the same group. You can see that like this wine, the base is bigger because again, red wines, most of them or a lot of them tend to be oaked. So again, you want it to open up in your glass so that some of that oakiness, some of that tannins mellow out a little bit before you actually start to drink it. So anytime you pour a red wine that you know that's been on barrel for a long time, like at least 18 months or more, let it just sort of sit for a few minutes, like maybe 15 minutes in your glass. I would recommend decanting as well. A wine could be decanted 30 minutes before that, depending on how long it's been in barrel. If it's been 2 or 3, like 2 years plus, I would say maybe decant it a good hour or so before you serve it. And let it really open up. So yes, the glasses do make a difference. And I would say don't drink wine out of a normal glass. It makes it flat tasting. Yeah.
So hipster restaurants, so sorry about that when they're serving it in little glasses.
Yes, that I hate to say it, that's a pet peeve of mine. So
I think of you every time it happens. Right, so
yeah. Anyways, okay, so I think I went through this as well. Like the wine tip is you should be storing wines in a cold, dark place. You don't want wine to be exposed to a lot of sunlight if you're not going to drink it for a while. If you can get a wine fridge to store it in, actually that's best. Even if the wine is meant to be drank within the first 5 years, it's actually better to store it in a wine fridge. The worst place is the kitchen because we turn on the oven, we cook, and all of a sudden the kitchen and the whole area heats up really, really high. And when you get over 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's actually starts to be the danger zone for wine being too hot. Over 80 is just really bad. So that's why you don't want to do it in your kitchen, because we're constantly cooking and then it cools down, and the whole temperature rising, temperature going down is not good. So in terms of service, Sameta so eloquently put this up here. In terms of service, red wine is best to be served between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a little bit cold, but not really cold. You want to store, or when you're storing it longer term, you want it to be between 50 and 55 degrees. For white, rosé, sparkling, and dessert wines, it's best at 40 to 50 degrees. So if you've ever been to a place where they pour the wine, or you poured the wine, it's been on ice, and all of a sudden you see your glass fog up, just either take your hands, I sometimes will do this, and go like this, if it's really, really cold, just to warm it up a bit, or let it sit on the table for maybe 15 minutes before you drink it to come up to like normal temperature, and then drink it, and it will be much more open. Otherwise, it will just taste very closed when you drink it. So any other questions?
I think that's it for questions, actually,
Okay.
which is perfect timing. Actually, there's one last question, and then we're gonna wrap up because we are just at 9 o'clock. Is there a sweet spot for a wine price and that you should get, and a generally good bottle?
It's a tough one because honestly, I think it's really producer driven. And I know Meta's heard me say this before as well. I know a lot of people have this image that wine, I just get this impression that people think wine is good quality, regardless of the price point. But the reality is, like our food system, not all wine is created equal. There are practices going on out there. And some of the newer producers or brands that might not be that great. They use a lot of pesticides. So me personally, I choose to drink wines that are more organic. I don't stick to it strictly, but I would drink more organic, biodynamic, because I know they're cleaner, and I eat organic fruits and vegetables myself. So if I'm taking care of what I'm putting into my body, I'm also trying to follow that with the wine that I'm drinking. So price point wise, I know the average consumer probably it buys between 12 and 18 as the average. I would say you're going to start getting better quality at probably about the $15 range. How do you find out about your wine? It's really about becoming, I know this sounds a little burdensome, but either maybe it's the person that's selling you the wine, maybe they'll know the story about the producer, what they produce. Maybe you know the producer yourself because you've gone in region and you know the practices that they follow. Or, somebody like me, and luckily I represent a brand called Boisset Collection Wines, and our wines follow old French traditions, which is organic, sustainability, farm to table, and biodynamic farming. So anyways, that would be my answer. I know it's not clear cut. I know it's not easy because it's not really an easy question to answer. So hopefully that gave you some guidance.
So thank you so much, Heather. June 4th, something completely different. And no, it's not wine. So you guys totally caught me pants down on the slide update, but this is super cool. It's Dr. Shu, Clayton Shu. He is one of the leading neuroscience acupuncturists. I've met him. And he works with stroke patients. He actually has gotten people post-stroke,
wow.
from, it sounds crazy, but from paralyzed to movement, because he's been studying just Chinese medicine his whole life. And he's been super busy through this whole pandemic with a lot of COVID patients actually, and treating them with supportive herbs, because there is no cure. We don't have a vaccines. And a lot of the times it's, you know, it's been pretty awesome what he's been doing. So he's going to actually discuss teas, just from our point of view, supportive teas. Did you know that not all teas are actually created the same for you? Huh?
Made equal?
They're not made equal, but they're also not made equal for you depending on your constitution. Like wine gets experienced differently by each person. So this is, again, a theme of how our experience to a degree defines the reality of what we actually consume. Please connect with us. This is a lot of @ signs, but got Heather on the left, us on the right.
And now everyone's seeing double since we've tasted a few wines.
So everyone, good night.
And actually, but Meta, before I'm going to interrupt you. So I do want to say, even though I know Meta and I are very close friends, but to Meta, Jill, and Yoshiko, I want to say thank you for giving me a platform to hopefully give you guys a little bit of education and a little bit of fun about wine so that you can connect more with what you like. So cheers, guys, and santé.
Fish lips. Good night, everyone.
Bye.